Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that all of you made it tonight. I'm so excited to introduce our featured speaker, author, and hiker, Jennifer Pharr Davis. She's from Asheville, North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina, so that's awesome. And she's written 2 books, Becoming Odessa and Called Again. And she and her family have been on a big countrywide book tour, and they've been hiking and speaking in all 50 states, and we are her 50th state. So I will stop talking and turn it over to Jennifer. Thank you.
Oh, hey y'all, thanks for coming out tonight. I am so excited to be here, and we've been traveling with our daughter, who turns 2 next month, in a Prius for the past 18 months. And Nevada is our 50th state, and that was our goal, to hike and talk in all 50 states. So we are so excited to be here. And actually, my daughter was so excited to get out of the car that we put her back in and take her to the library. And I also love, driving in is clear that there's a lot of great hikes around here. So in a way, I feel like we saved one of the best hiking locations for last, and that's fun. And I know a lot of you are already hikers. If you're not, we're pretty fortunate tonight to have a local hiking club and the representative branch here. He's part of the 52 Peak Club, which is a local hiking club here in Las Vegas. And I love to connect people with their local hiking community and resources. So if you want to talk about that with someone after the talk is over, Branch, can you raise your hand? That's the guy you want to talk to, okay? And tonight, it's a joy for me to share my trail stories, and I love to hike. I've been fortunate enough to have hiked over 12,000 miles of long-distance trails on 6 different continents. Yeah. So which continent do you think I have not been to? Sorry, I love Las Vegas. I do not do cold weather well. I'm from the southeast, so heat, humidity, not a problem, but ice and cold are not my thing. But out of all the places where I have hiked and I have traveled, the trail that means the most to me, and also the trail that's changed my life the most, is the Appalachian Trail. And I've actually hiked the entire 2,185-mile Appalachian Trail 3 separate times. 3 times. And it was the most recent time in 2011 where, with my husband's help, we set the overall record for men and women. So for 46 straight days, I averaged 47 miles a day.
Wow.
And that's crazy, right? Yeah. Usually everyone can agree that that's a little crazy. But hopefully we can all agree that a journey of any distance or any speed always has to start with a single step, right? You have a question?
Yeah. How much were you carrying?
How much was I carrying? Well, I'll talk about the record in detail in the second half of the talk. But the basic answer is as little as possible. And that's a pretty typical hiker answer. If you're going out for 10 days without resupply, you're going to be carrying a lot, but still, you're not going to be carrying things you don't need. So on the record, I had support, but sometimes I was still backpacking, camping overnight, and it was always about minimizing the things that I needed, but taking everything that was required to be safe and healthy.
10 pounds, 15 pounds.
Wide range. It all depended. 5 pounds to 25 pounds. But on my first hike, which I want to talk about, because that was my first step into the wilderness, and that was a traditional backpacking trip, and very different. I carried my full pack, tent, sleeping bag, lots of food. But before I even talk about the trail, I do want to mention, I didn't grow up in a family that took trips outdoors. I didn't grow up backpacking. And so my first step into the wilderness didn't happen until I was 21 years old, which is sad. But it's sad. But nowadays, really with work, or if you're a kid, homework, school, family life, commitments, if you're not focused, if your family's not focused on getting outside, you're not going to spend a whole lot of time outdoors. And when I graduated from college, I felt like I didn't know anything about the wilderness. And that really bothered me. I mean, a part of me felt like because I didn't know anything about the natural world, I really didn't know myself either. So I wanted to try and fix that. And I decided I was going to take some time and take all that babysitting money I'd earned in college and try to hike the Appalachian Trail. Now, obviously, it would have helped if I had any sort of backpacking experience, which I did not, but the good thing is, at age 21, that doesn't seem to matter, you know? Inexperience never seems to matter to a 21-year-old. So I started by myself in Georgia with my brother's old Boy Scout gear and the goal of walking all the way to Maine. Yeah, that's a long way. And on that first journey, I was out there for 5 full months, which is fairly standard when you're trying to complete the entire trail. But at that time, it was the 5 hardest months I had ever known. Yet even today, and that first trip happened over 10 years ago, even today I'll say, that was the best 5 months of my entire life. Because the trail completely changed me. And I needed that. I mean, I liked the woman at the end a whole lot more than the girl who had started. And I could spend all night telling you about that first journey. I could talk about lessons I learned. I could describe some folks I met along the way. Because trust me, there's some characters out on the Appalachian Trail. But you don't have all night, and I have an almost 2-year-old back at the hotel who wants me to get back and read her a bedtime story. So I'm not going to focus our evening on that first journey. Instead, I'm going to try to sum up the journey and the transformation by reading a passage from my first book. And my first book, which chronicles that experience, is titled Becoming Odessa. And I know to most of you that sounds like a strange title. I mean, half the people read the book and they still can't pronounce it. But just so you know, Odessa is my trail name. And it's really common when you go and you hike the long distance path that while you're out there you take a nickname that hikers call a trail name. I know we have a lot of hikers in here. Do we have any trail names in here? Anyone willing to share? No? Come on, 52 Peak Club. Y'all need some nicknames. You need some handles. Well, it's a fun tradition, and if you do want a trail name, just go out to a long distance trail. Go to the Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail, and you'll get one very quickly. Because here's the thing. Hikers love to try and give other hikers their trail name. It's one of the favorite pastimes on the trail. And my first week on the AT, the Appalachian Trail, by the way, if you can't tell, I'm 6 feet tall. And I've been this height since 8th grade. So I got suggestions like Sasquatch, Amazon, and Stretch. And all of a sudden, all the old wounds from middle school were just ripped open. And I didn't want any of those names. But then I was being a dork and comparing the trail to Homer's Odyssey. So another hiker said, well, what about Odysseus? And I liked that, but I was proud to be a woman out there because there weren't that many, especially hiking by themselves. So I sort of wanted a feminine trail name. So we changed Odysseus to Odessa, and I've been Odessa on every hike since. And this is a passage from the last full day of Odessa's first journey. When people had asked why I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail, one of the answers I had given was that I wanted time to think about where I wanted to live and what I wanted to do for a living. And the trail would give me plenty of time to do that. But now that I was at the end, I didn't feel any closer to knowing those answers than when I started. The only thing I felt more certain of at the end of this journey was myself. I was no longer defined by my resume, And I didn't give answers based on what I thought other people wanted to hear. For the first time in my life, I knew who I was, and I was okay with who I was. At the end of this journey, I definitely believed in God. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed to hide that. My affection for other hikers and their acceptance of me helped me realize that regardless of faith and background, if you get to know people, not what they are, but who they are, then you'll experience love and friendship you might otherwise have missed. I also now knew that something deep within me connected with nature, and with hard work, and with simplicity. And I learned that I was both stubborn and tough. A lot tougher than I thought I was, especially when I let other people help me along the way. Now, when it was all said and done, I got off trail, and I got a job. I mean, much to my mother's relief. I got a job, and it was a good job. I was working with fun people, living in a great place, and everything said that I should have been happy, should have been content. But then the weeks started to pass, and then the months started to pass, and all I could think about was the trail. And I missed it. I missed moving through nature. I mean, my job was great, but it was a desk job. Do you feel me? Anyone? You know what I'm talking about? I sat there for 8 hours a day. And while I sat there, a lot of the time, I would long for the friends I had made on the trail. It was the first environment I had been a part of where the people who were the closest to me were extremely different from me. And that made life really fun, really interesting. But surprisingly, and I'm going to say surprisingly because when I started, I was a typical 21-year-old leaving behind her friends, family, computer, TV. And I was terrified that I was going to be bored and lonely. But then when it was over, all of a sudden I longed for the silence and the solitude that I had discovered, as much as I longed for the friends I had made. But the thing I miss most of all sounds really strange, because I really missed how beautiful I felt out on the trail. And that doesn't quite make sense, because when I was on the trail, I promise you, I was filthy. Filthy. Covered in dirt. We won't even talk about the smell, you know, because A, you can't put it into words, and B, it's East Coast smell. It's East, which is way worse. I mean, the humidity on it's just, trust me, it's way worse than West Coast smell. Plus, I had scrapes, bug bites, bruises covering my body. But for 5 months, I didn't have a mirror. And I don't know if this is sad or funny, but when I go to high schools, I literally have to explain that this was before the day of the selfie. Really, that I wasn't taking digital pictures of myself the entire way. And I didn't have billboards, magazines, or commercials telling me what I should look like. So I started to see myself in a whole new way. I saw my reflection through my interactions with other hikers. So if I made someone else smile, that made me feel pretty. And also growing up, I had always thought that nature was beautiful. But I had never seen myself as a part of nature and a part of all that beauty until I hiked the trail. And after walking through 14 states, which, by the way, I love saying that out here in the West, because your states are so big. It makes it sound so far. Anyway, after hiking through 14 states, I got to the end, and now I base my self-worth a whole lot less on how I looked and a whole lot more on what I could do. And the trail makes you realize that you can do so much more than you once thought was possible. I mean, it exposed me to so many new things, new people. It broke down so many mental barriers that I had. And now I wanted to do more. I wanted to do more on and off the trail. And as time passed, I started saving up money from work. I started saving up time away from work. And I started to plan another big hike. And one of the best parts about being a hiker is that there are trails everywhere. I mean, all over Las Vegas, all over the U.S., all over the world. And in my opinion, hiking is perhaps the most affordable, accessible, and best way to travel. So I actually want to take a minute and share some of my favorite hiking pictures from different trails around the world with you all. And we can hit the lights. And as these pictures scroll through, I'll try to tell you where they were taken. So we'll start our journey tonight in Africa at Mount Kilimanjaro.
Rise and fall like the tide. My hand moves with your chest. Steady now, movable, slow and even.
Go very quickly to Australia. It's on the 600-mile Bibbulmun track.
Thunder strikes, but I will be a place for you to hide.
Now we head to Peru. This is in Cotahuasi Canyon, one of the deepest in the world. And that hurt. Hurt a lot. The next pictures come from the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. This is the Pacific Crest Trail, so California, Oregon, and Washington. All the rest of the pictures will come from Europe.
Just before it breaks, I will light a candle. Your heart rises and it falls just like gold wings. The highest point is just before it breaks. I will light a candle for your welcoming. Baby, come home to me. Your heart rises and it falls just like gold wings. The highest point is just before it breaks. I will light a candle for your welcoming. Baby, come home to me. Baby, come home to me. Baby, come home to
All right, did you guys like those pictures?
Oh, great.
Good. Well, hopefully you can see, because I'm not even a good photographer, but I'm a decent hiker. And the trail can take you to these just gorgeous locations. And for several years, I fell into a routine of just working and then hiking and working and hiking. But by the time I was 25, I admitted I had a problem. And recently I said this and someone shouted back, and 12 steps just wasn't going to fix it. I mean, I was a hiker. All my time, all my money, it was going to the trail. So at that point, I quit my day job and I decided to try and start my own hiking company. Because what I really wanted to do is get other people outdoors. And I thought I could do it through writing and speaking and guiding on the trail. But I also wanted to hike a little on my own too. And I was in the beginning stages of planning my next adventure when all of a sudden something happened that I thought might ruin everything. Any guesses? Exactly. Exactly. I fell in love, I got engaged, and I was convinced that at the time in my life when I was ready to be married, I would need to be ready to settle down, or at least just slow down. But I was really fortunate to meet this great guy who loves me for me, which is the crazy hiker, and he is extremely supportive. But maybe most important of all, I ended up marrying a fella who at the time was a public school teacher. So what does that mean? Summer's off. That's right. This could work, right? I mean, we could still have adventures, and now I can have adventures with someone else. I had always wanted that. And this was perfect because I told Brew, that's my husband, I told him on our very first date that I really wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail again. And as much as he loved me, I mean, even after we were engaged, he still did not want to hike 2,185 miles a week. Imagine that. So we started to talk about how I could hike, but how we could also spend time together. And we came up with the idea of doing a supported hike. Now, a supported hike takes a really long trail like the AT, and it basically turns it into a series of day hikes. This is what we were saying earlier. Now, instead of carrying the big full pack with tent, sleeping bag, and food, I was just carrying a day pack with only the items I needed to reach the next road crossing, because at every road crossing, there would be my husband, and what else would be there? Food, that's right, food, gear, supplies, fresh socks. I mean, clean socks are like the best thing ever when you're a hiker. And I could get whatever I wanted, but just what I needed to reach the following road crossing. And as soon as we decided that we would complete the trail in that manner, and knowing we wanted to do it in the summer months when we could be together, well, I decided that along the way, I wanted to try and establish a women's record on the Appalachian Trail. Because as long as I had heard about these supported hikes, not all of them, but a number of them had been in regards to records. But every record I had ever heard of on the Appalachian Trail, not just for speed, every record I had ever heard of belonged to a man. And I'm all about some girl power. I am. So I figured, well, there should be a women's record too. And there really wasn't one. So I thought if we were smart and if I stayed healthy, we could probably accomplish that goal. And it was back on June 8, 2008 when Brew and I, we got married. And it was lovely. But then just 12 days later, we started the trail. Yeah. And, you know, once again, I could spend all night telling you about this journey, and I won't. But I will say, if you ever really want to work on communication, then I highly recommend a 2,000-mile supported hike. But after 57 days of communicating and working together and being a team, we got to the end. We made it to Springer Mountain, Georgia. And we accomplished our goal. We established a women's record. Along the way, I had averaged 38 miles a day. Yeah, not too shabby, right? I mean, it was challenging, it was hard, but I was surprised at how much I loved it. I did. I loved it. And now when I look back, I sort of think to myself, well, that summer, I should have loved it. Because there I was, I mean, newlywed, cloud 9, out there on my favorite trail, getting to do exactly what I love, all day, every day. And meanwhile, the man who I love more than anyone was running all of my errands. All of them, every single one. So when we got to the end, Brew and I walked up the last mountain together. And on the summit, there's a plaque which represents the end. So we went up to it, and we both put our hands on it. And as soon as we did, I just turned to my husband, grinning from ear to ear. And then he turned to me, and he said, "We are never doing that again." And he meant it. And usually he's with me at talks. He's not here tonight, but trust me, he meant it. However, there was just one small problem. And I didn't even really know that it was a problem at the time. But we walked off the mountain to get to our car and go home. And as we descended down the trail, I knew that I could have kept going. I knew I still had something left, something substantial. And now I realized that when you're trying to set a record on a long distance trail, it's not about speed or strength or even gender. What do you think it's all about? Heard a lot of things. I think most of them are right. Stamina. Yeah. Persistence. Recovery. Yeah. Support, a big part of it.
Setting the goal.
Strategy, sure. I like to point, a lot of it's here, a lot of it's here, a lot of it's here. Good weather. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I was thinking through all those different things, and now there was this small voice inside of me that said, I might have what it would take to set the overall record. But I took that voice and I buried it down deep, and I thought it would just probably go away. And the next few summers, Brew and I agreed that we would hike much shorter trails at a much slower pace and hike side by side. And even he would tell you that we had so much fun. I mean, we did. We went to Colorado. We did the Colorado Trail from Denver to Durango. And then the following year, we went over to Europe, and there are footpaths everywhere in Europe. And we had an incredible time together. But what do you think happened to that small voice? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It did not go away. It got bigger, got stronger. And it got to the point where I knew there were, okay, only two options. Either we would go back and try, at least just try for the record, or else I would always look back. And I would always wonder what might have been. So I sat down with Brew and we had a long conversation. And I was shameless. I used every bribe, every bargaining chip I could think of, which included, football game tickets, really good craft beer, and also future offspring. Because I figured if I was going to carry his kid for 9 months, then he should carry my stuff down the trail for a few more months too. So we had this long conversation, but by the end, he had agreed to help one more time. Do you have a question?
Just as a framework, did you have a really strong sports background as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing tennis and basketball. So not necessarily endurance sports,
Okay,
but
you were tough. Like these.
tough. Yes, so tough. I had 2 older brothers, and they like to say that they made me tough. But I loved movement. I loved being outside, but I never found it until I found hiking. That was my passion. And now I wanted to go back and I wanted to see, well, what does it look like? As an athlete, what does it look like to give 100% on the trail? So in 2011, Brew and I, we went back to the Appalachian Trail, and we decided that, for the record, we wanted to start in Maine, not in Georgia. Do we have any East Coasters in here? Why do you think we wanted to start in Maine? Any guesses?
Well, it's at the
It's at the top.
very northern part of the country.
Yes. It's not downhill, though. We all, it's not downhill. But because it was up in the northern part of the country, had some really long daylight hours of the year in the summer, and Maine and New Hampshire are the toughest 2 states on the entire trail. So we decided we wanted to get through the hardest part in the beginning with the longest daylight hours of the year. So we started in Maine in mid-June. And for the first few days, everything went about how we thought it would. Then on day 5, I was going up a very steep mountain, and on my way to the summit, I noticed this sharp pain that was developing in my right leg, in between my knee and my ankle. And when I got to the ridge, I was in so much discomfort that all I could do was just limp down the trail. And I kept limping until the exact same pain that was in my right leg developed in my left leg as well. Within about 3 hours, I had full-blown shin splints. You've had shin splints? Yeah. Yeah. I can usually tell. Like, I'll say the word, and folks who have dealt with shin splints will grimace. Like, it's the worst thing ever. Because it's the worst thing ever? Yeah, okay. I mean, here's the thing. When you have shin splints, walking is excruciating. Walking uphill is excruciating. But going downhill is unbearable. Literally. There were times on my descent I would plant my foot and my leg just buckled beneath me because of pain, and I collapsed down to the trail. But I was pretty convinced that my injury had been caused by the high mileage days on the rocks up in Maine. I trained really hard, but I trained down south, where we have a lot of nice dirt trails. And up in Maine and New Hampshire, they have a lot of exposed, unforgiving granite. But if I could just get to Vermont, remember how we talked about trail names? Vermont's trail name is Vermud. That's what people call it. It's the one state where you take a step and you lift your foot and the shoe is no longer attached to it. I mean, it's shoe-sucking mud. So it's sloppy and it's messy, but it's soft. Yeah, and I thought it might be soft enough to where my legs could start to heal. So that was my goal, get to Vermont, and all I had to do was hike through New Hampshire to make it there. Exactly, yeah. And even getting into New Hampshire, I was in so much pain that almost every time I got to the top of a mountain, I would turn around and then hike or scramble downhill backwards. Yeah. And no one once, because you pass a lot of people on the Appalachian Trail, and no one once during that section stopped and asked, hey, aren't you that girl who's trying to set the record? No. But at one point, another hiker stopped me and asked if I was lost or confused. But like so many times in life, whether it's literal or figurative, by being willing to take a few steps backwards, I was able to keep going forward. And I got into New Hampshire, and if there's one state where I just pray for good weather, it's New Hampshire. And when I arrived, I had 24 hours of decent weather. And then I started up the slopes of Mount Washington. And Mount Washington, it's one of the highest peaks on the trail, and also, at one point, it had the highest recorded wind speed of any place on the planet. Yeah. It's notorious for its wind and its bad weather. And sure enough, as soon as I got above tree line, the wind picked up, the type of wind that can knock you over. And then the clouds rolled in, and then the rain started to fall. And for the next day and a half, I was hiking through a torrential downpour. But I kept telling myself that at some point it would have to change. And it finally did. It changed after 36 hours when I got up to another high ridge, and there the last week of June, I was no longer in the rainstorm because now I was in the middle of this sideways sleep. Yeah. And I thought I was prepared. I had great gear. But I don't care what type of Gore-Tex you're wearing. After a day and a half straight of pouring rain, water gets in or sweat doesn't get out. So I was up there, I was soaking wet, I was shivering, I felt like I was starving, and again, I kind of have to explain that yes, I had extra snacks, but again, there comes this point where you lose the dexterity, the desire to open another frozen Cliff Bar and just lick it or gnaw on it, you know? So I was out there and I was just miserable and I wanted to do anything to take my mind off the conditions. So I started to sing out loud. But from the very beginning, I was just slurring the song and I was mumbling all the words. And oh yeah, I was tripping like every 5 or 6 steps. So I acknowledged what deep down I already knew. What was that? Yeah. I was moderately hypothermic and it was becoming a lot worse very quickly. And by the time I got to the base of the mountain, I was so cold and so stiff that I could barely bend my joints. But Brew, he assumed there had been bad weather. So he hiked in as far as he could and then he set up our tent. And as soon as I saw it, I got inside. Now I was so rigid, I couldn't even undress myself. He had to help me out of cold, wet clothes into 2 sleeping bags, and for the next 30 minutes I laid there and I just shivered. But when I finally started to relax just a little bit, what do you think I wanted to do next? Before I wanted to hike, I wanted to eat. Yeah, food is wonderful medicine for hypothermia. And Brew, he had the camp stove, he was making coffee, and you know, food, it will warm you. Just, it felt so good. The coffee was so good, the food was so good, and I was, by the way, voracious. I mean, in the next 20 minutes, I don't always tell this story, but in the next 20 minutes, I consumed over 3,000 calories.
Oh.
And I know that for a fact because Brew, my loving husband, took some type of sick pleasure in counting all the wrappers and keeping a running tally of all the calories that I was consuming. But at the end of eating all that food and drinking all those warm liquids, I felt a little bit better, and I wanted to try to keep going. And Brew packed in the tent and the food, and he even remembered extra clothes. So I was able to put on a warm fleece and a dry rain jacket, but as I was getting dressed, I realized there was not an extra pair of pants. So I turned to the corner of the tent where my cold, wet, icy pants sat in the middle of a puddle. And then I turned to my husband. And I glanced back at the puddle, and I looked back at Brew, and I said, I want your pants. And this is so, I have this, really just the sweetest husband, because this is so Brew. He did not bat an eye, he did not disagree. The only thing he said during this entire exchange was, at least ask nicely. At least say please. You gotta have some dignity out there, you know? So, said please, got his pants, kept going. As a side note, he packed up all our gear and then he marched back to the road on June 27th wearing the Grinch that stole Christmas boxers. Okay? I'll never forget that detail. But I share that story not to talk about my husband's underwear. I tell it because, you know, that story, along with a lot of others that I could share, it so clearly illustrates the point that it's the support. The support is so important on this type of endeavor. And it was really cool to me that, you know, there I was on this trail that when I hiked it as a 21-year-old, it taught me all about self-sufficiency and being independent. And then 8 years later, it's teaching me all about teamwork. It's teaching me that being able to ask for help is often more important than feeling independent. And it was teaching me that a strong team is always going to do better, be better than a strong individual. Because there have been better athletes, I mean folks who I consider to be better athletes who have gone after this mark. Just this past summer, the man who's won more 100-mile races than anyone else in America went after this record, and he didn't get it.
Wow.
And if you want to know why, the reason I think is because he didn't have the level of support that I received. And it wasn't just Brew. I talk a lot about Brew because he was the only one who was with me from the beginning all the way to the end. But we had friends, family members, hikers, runners who came out for a few hours or a few days to help us along the way. And I truly consider it a team effort and a team accomplishment. But when I think about that effort, I think it has more to do with Brew's support than anything else. And one of the reasons I say that is because I know I would have quit without him. See, I finally got to Vermont, and I still had shin splints. Now I had weird side effects from the hypothermia, and because of that, or on top of that, I got really sick. And that's not fun at home, but it's especially not fun on the trail. And the type of sick I had, I wasn't even on the trail. I was just running off the trail every few minutes. And that's when you really like hiking in a forest. I mean, I don't know what you do out here, but I was just running off trail into the bushes and becoming depleted and dehydrated, and now giving it my all, I couldn't even go 1 mile per hour. So for the first time on any trail, I quit. 100% in my mind was finished. I told myself I'd just get to the next road crossing, and when I made it there, we were headed home. So I finally arrived. I walked out of the forest crying. And Brew was there, so I told him how sick I was, I told him how much I hurt, and I told him that we were finished with the trail. And this is the man who gave me the pants off his spot, right? So I knew that he was going to wrap me up in his arms, tell me it was okay, and then get me to some place where I could start to feel better. So I looked at him waiting for my embrace, and he looked straight back at me and basically said, "Suck it up." Suck it up. Yeah. And we have been to 50 states telling these stories, and every time I tell this story, I get a little angry. I mean, it happens every single time. I was at a very low point, and he did not have much sympathy. But when I finally tuned in and listened to his reasoning, here's what I caught. He said, if you really want to quit, if that's truly what you want, that's fine. But you just can't quit right now. He actually said, I think you feel too bad to make a good decision. So he insisted that I eat, drink, take medicine, and then keep going until the next night. In 36 hours, he said, if you still want to quit, I'll take you home. So I left that road crossing counting the minutes, and the miles, until I could officially quit. But after several miles, the medicine kicked in. And I could hold in some food and some water, so I felt a little bit better. But let's be very clear, when I felt a little bit better, I still felt horrible. And no part of me thought I could set the record. I was doing the math. I was on day 12, averaging 38 miles a day. And that meant every single day until the finish for 5 straight weeks, I would have to average over 50 miles a day. Yeah. And I didn't think I could do that. But I realized that my ultimate goal was not the record. My ultimate goal was to find my best on the trail. I mean, we had talked about it. We knew our next adventure, we wanted to have a family. I wanted to be a mom. And I didn't want to look back and have those unanswered questions. I really did want to know what it felt like to give 100% on the trail that I loved the most. And so I decided to keep going, not so much for the record, but to try to find my best on the trail. And it was amazing, the psychological shift that occurred, because up until that point, we fixated on numbers. Miles per hour, miles per day, where the previous record setter was at any given point. And in a lot of ways, it was his hike, it wasn't ours. But after Vermont, the one thing that Brew and I said back and forth every single day was just do your best. All you can do. And after 46 days of leaving everything on the trail, giving it everything we had, we got to the end. We got there and accomplished what almost everyone thought was impossible, and at times what I thought was impossible, but Brew never believed that it was impossible. Because we set the overall record, and it was the first time that a woman had surpassed the mark of a man on a long distance trail. So it got some attention. It got some praise, it got some criticism, and it got a lot of questions. But here's the thing, nobody was asking the right questions. And I mean, we're about to wrap up, but I want to take one more minute and read a passage from my newest book, which is about the record. And this selection is going to talk a little bit about my feelings and my frustrations right after we finished. After it was over, Brew and I both gave multiple interviews and answered copious amounts of questions, but no one once asked what I'd learned. No one asked what the most valuable part of the experience had been. Instead, everyone wanted to focus on the numbers. They wanted to talk about how I hiked and did not run 46.93 miles per day. They asked what I had to consume to eat over 6,000 calories per day. And they asked if I was scared to see 36 bears that summer. Scared? That was one of the highlights of the trip. Why didn't anyone ask about the notions of living in the present, or choosing something purposeful and fulfilling over something fun and easy? What about the necessity of asking other people for help and of not succumbing to the fear of failure? Or the idea that persistence and consistency can be more valuable than speed and strength? Why didn't they ask about everyone who had helped us? Wasn't it clear that this was a group endeavor? And what about Brew? Why did no one realize that the most miraculous part of the summer was not the record, but how well my husband had loved me and served me along the way? I want to be very clear. I don't expect anyone to leave here tonight and want to hike 47 miles a day. I don't. And I know and I appreciate that trail records, in a large part, are misunderstood. But I hope that when you leave here tonight, you walk out of this room and you know that it's about more than the numbers. I mean, the trail is about more than the numbers. And one thing I do value about these records is that it's an amateur pursuit. So you do it for the love of it. It's based on the honor system. And I promise you, when you get to the end, there's no trophy. There's not even a free t-shirt. I mean, there's nothing there. But that doesn't mean there isn't a reward. And that's the great thing about going outdoors. It doesn't matter how far you go. It doesn't matter how fast you go. I've hiked in a lot of different ways. Now, mostly, I just day hike with my daughter. But every time I go outdoors, there's a reward. So my hope is you leave here and that you go outdoors. And I hope that when you do, you find your reward. So thank you for coming, and thank you to the library for hosting the program. I get excited when I finish with a few minutes to spare. Because I have one final slideshow with Appalachian Trail pictures from the summer where we set the record, and that's usually how we conclude. But it looks like we have 4 or 5 minutes for questions. I love questions. So if anyone has one, feel free. Yeah.
So how did you train? Like, did you run a lot?
I did run a lot, and I love to run. I've done ultra marathons, and because you don't have with life and relationships and work, Running's a great way to get your miles. Over weekends, especially long weekends, I would try to focus on hiking. And when I hiked, I would actually carry a very heavy pack, a 40, 50-pound pack, which I would never carry on the trail. But I would load it up with firewood or water because I, again, just wanted to maximize that time that I had on the trail and kind of stress out my muscles and work on climbing specifically when I was out there. So running, stretching, hiking, anything that I could do, yeah.
On average, how many hours per day?
16 to 17 hours a day. I was very consistent, 16 or 17. The first full day and the last full day were the longest, and those were both 60-mile days, and those were 21, 22-hour days. But beyond that, 16 or 17 hours.
How do you have time to eat 3 meals a day when you're walking that distance?
You're eating like 8 meals a day.
Are you walking while you're eating?
Yes, so every hour on the trail I would pull out a snack and I would eat. And then there would be 3 to 4 breaks a day where I'd try to eat over 1,000 calories. Like if I got to a road crossing and Brew was there, I'd put my feet up, he'd refuel the pack, you know, get everything I needed for the next stretch, and I would just eat and eat and eat and drink. So yeah, it was a lot of eating.
How do you support this? Does your hiking company generate income? You take out other people, or?
Yeah, so for the past 6 years I have had my own hiking company, and you know, my husband was a school teacher, so obviously we were rich. You know. Actually, I hear teachers in Las Vegas get paid pretty well. Well, that's what I heard. North Carolina does not treat their teachers very well, but it's not a very expensive thing. I mean, a lot of people would say we did it on a shoestring. It costs about $2 per mile to hike a long distance trail, and even doing the support and doing the record, it was about the same. So we saved up. It was our priority, and we saved up, and that was important, and so we made it happen.
But you do take out people.
We do take out people, yes. And even on the road, we have a great roster of guides at home in Asheville, and we take out people on the Appalachian Trail and in Western North Carolina. So it's a great place if you want a hiking destination.
So when the first time you did the trail, like how long did it take you to like mentally get prepared? Because that's what gets me. I've got to know what I'm doing, what time of the year, what, you know, how.
Yeah. That's the beauty, seriously, that's the beauty of being 21, is like, you don't think about those things. You really don't. Like, if I was hiking for the first time at 31, it would be very different. It would look very different. But, you know, I read some stuff on the internet. I took this kind of 4-day crash course for hiking the Appalachian Trail, and I had my brother's Boy Scout gear, so I thought, I was good to go. And I don't recommend that. I wish I had practiced. I wish I had put more time into the preparation. But the Appalachian Trail is a very forgiving trail, especially for beginning hikers, because there's so many other hikers who want to tell you the right way to do it. There's so many trail towns, trail hostels, access points to get on and off if something comes up. So again, I would recommend if someone wants to get started, well, contact your local hiking club. Start doing day hikes. Do it, you know, an overnight before planning a 5-month trip. But, you know, there's.
I mean, because you do new trips all the time, so
Yeah.
even now, how old you are, you must, like you're saying, even with your daughter, if you take your daughter, I don't know how old your daughter is, but there's like, gotta be
Planning.
that.
Well, yeah, but we're also really used to it now. You know how some people, let's say they have a vacation home or a second home, and every time they go, they know, okay, we're going to have to take this, and these are the things we do to close up or go. And that's, I mean, the trail is our second home.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to just say, here are the things we need. We've got it all packed up, ready to go, and boom, we're off in just a few minutes. But yeah, use the resources of the people around you, because if you don't have to make those mistakes
Right.
of a beginning hiker, like, you know, it's wonderful to be able to learn from someone who knows what they're doing. All right, 1 or 2 more questions? Yeah.
Just a quick question. I'm from the east, but I've never hiked, obviously, the whole thing. Do you hit, obviously you hit Washington, do you hit like Mount Marcy, and are you doing a lot of peaks, or is it mostly through?
It's a lot of peaks. It's not like the Continental Divide or the Pacific Crest Trail where you stay up high on the crest. A lot of times, Appalachian Trail hikers call them PUDs, pointless ups and downs. So you're doing this and this, and it's not really in a linear fashion, and you're wondering why you keep going up and down. But it does, I mean, it follows the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. It goes up and down. You don't, in New Hampshire, you do the McCoosic Range, you do the Presidentials, you do Mount Moosilauke, and then you basically get to the Green Mountains of Vermont after that. So, again, if you're looking for the most efficient way, it's not the Appalachian Trail. But
The reason I'm thinking is you're averaging 3 miles an hour,
Yeah.
basically, right?
yeah, not in Maine and New Hampshire. It was 2 miles per hour in Maine and New Hampshire.
Okay. So I'm just thinking, you said you don't run, and you very much need to if you're doing elevation and.
It's just really long days. I mean, that's the trade-off. And again, this is not running versus hiking. I love movement. Like anything you want to do, great.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of time management.
And so here's the advantage. It's a modern day, fable of the tortoise and the hare. By going long, I need less time to recover. Running is harder on your body. There's more impact on your joints. By hiking, I'm better able to utilize hiking sticks, which also take impact off of my joints. I'm less likely to fall because I'm not running, and it's a very technical trail. The disadvantage is that I had 6 hours of sleep every night. And a lot of runners, they may have more than that because they're doing their miles faster. But a lot of the trail's not really runnable. I mean, it's very technical. So, pros and cons. For me, I definitely think hiking was the right decision. Yeah?
About how long was your entire recovery process after, from how long did it take you to finally get over all the sickness and injury? It's a great question. I feel like most of the physical side effects and the fatigue had worn off in about 2 to 3 months. But I really felt like I wasn't fully recovered for about 6 months. Like I didn't have those reserves built back up for about 6 months. And then, we decided that we wanted to try to have a family, and I got pregnant that month. So, I think my body was healthy at that point, but I'm surprised it took a lot out physically. It also took a lot out mentally and emotionally, and that surprised me. And I think in some ways it took some things out that might not ever fully get put back in. Like I don't know if I'll ever have the drive and the discipline and the focus that I had for that record. So. What? You used it up?
I used it up, which, now I really love going slow. Yeah, it is okay. Thank you. I know, I really appreciate that, because most people are like, what's next? It's got to be bigger. It's got to be better. And no, thank you. I appreciate it. That's a good one to end on. So we'll stop there, because I feel good about myself. And I will say, if you're interested in books, these are the 2 that I've authored. Called Again, it's about the record. It's $25. Becoming Odessa is the journey of a traditional through hike. This is when I was 21. It's also 25. My husband kept a blog the summer that we set the record. So if you're interested in his perspective, the book is called 46 Days Keeping Up with Jennifer Pharr Davis on the Appalachian Trail. And again, he's not here, but he would get mad if I didn't say this because he came up with it. He's like the marketing manager guy. All 3 books together, if you decide you want to get all 3, we call it the Trailogy. So I'll be here. I can take card, cash, or check. That's real easy. If you have more questions, feel free to just stop by, and we'll conclude with this final slideshow with a T-Mix. That
I had my dreams, big ideas, but reality was grounding. I appeared to be dying tree, but others tell me around me. Escape on highs, what a waste of time. Won't let that light define me. You can't see what's hiding here beneath the surface. You can't tell how my heart grows till you unearth it. And then
Yay!